Good morning, everyone. Some good news this morning from the Commonwealth Fund, which talks about the progress of the Affordable Care Act, of which I am very proud. It has already lowered the uninsured rate among young adults overall, these are not young adults between 19 and 64, from 20% to 15% among adults. Among younger people, it's even a greater reduction in uninsured. So we're very excited about that. And in addition, the CBO expects the government to spend $50 billion less in Medicare this year than it expected to 4 years ago, thanks in part to the Affordable Care Act. That means $1,000 less per beneficiary this year and $2,400 less per beneficiary by 2019. So that is good news. Other good news, as you see, since when the president was sworn into office, where the stock market was about 7,000, now over 4th of July, it reached over 17,000, more than double increase. Unemployment is down from around 10 when he took office, 6.1% now, and going in the right direction with a positive jobs report. The deficit is less than half of what it was when the president took office. So all of this going in the right direction. Instead, here we have the wrong direction being advocated by our Republican colleagues, despite all of the progress that's made. And by no means are we satisfied, because America's working families are still not enjoying the benefits of an economy that works for everyone. So we have important work to do, but we're going in the right direction. In response, the Republicans want to sue the president. They are resisting initiatives that would be enormous job creators. They have a mini highway bill that takes us into a rut rather than something our economy can ride on in a very positive way, and we have that opportunity to do so. The Ex-Im Bank, they don't want to reauthorize and fund, and that is responsible for hundreds of thousands of jobs in our country, too. The TRIA, which is about terrorism risk insurance, very important to growth in our country and investment in our country. And, of course, the immigration bill, which, for all the right reasons we should be doing in terms of who we are as a nation and our values, but the business case for it is a very strong one. That's why the business community is so strongly for it. As a Californian, where it's agriculture and technology and hospitality industry and the rest, well, every state in the union now shares in all of those industries and others that would benefit from passing comprehensive immigration reform. And on top of which, CBO tells us that over a 10-year life of the bill, we would reduce the deficit by nearly $1 trillion. So in addition to the Bible, the faith-based groups who support this, the badges, the law enforcement initiative leadership that supports the legislation, the third B, the business community case for that and what it means to our economy are strong. Wrong direction on the part of the Republicans. We have two issues. I mentioned the Highway Trust Fund. They're coming up with it, which will expire. They are talking about a mini bill until next year, just kick the can a little bit, not even down the road, but down the path a little bit, instead of embracing what the business community, what everybody is saying that we need. What the Society of Civil Engineers says is a severe deficit in our infrastructure and transportation in our economy. The response is so small, as I say, to put us in a rut rather than onto a road of economic growth. And then, of course, we have the supplemental, which is the subject at hand, something which should be brought up immediately, voted upon, and recognized as the emergency that it is. During the break, I visited Brownsville, Texas, and saw the challenge that we are facing there. Little children coming across the border. It's not a question of the border not being secure. These people are turning themselves in. They're not being captured. They're turning themselves in. So whatever you think of it, there is a humanitarian need. No one speaks to it more eloquently than the National Catholic Conference of Bishops in their report on it. No one has stronger presentation on it than the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, calling these children refugees. The bishops talk about a baby Jesus fleeing violence. That's how they begin in the beginning of their report. And at the end of their report, they say to send these children back would be to be like sending them into a burning building. Well, in the meantime, we have a challenge that we must meet. The supplemental takes us a long way toward meeting the humanitarian challenge that is there, having due process to send those back who should go back, and also help with border security, which is our right as a country to secure our border from others who might exploit the situation that is there, taking advantage of the good nature and the compassion of the American people. So this supplemental is what everybody knows is needed. Hopefully it will dawn on the Republican leadership in the House, because that's where an appropriations bill must begin, that we should proceed forthwith. We can have the debate as to what we might want to add. I'm very pleased that the supplemental has the $600 million for wildfire, the funds that are needed to fight wildfire and prevent. I wish it weren't needed, but since it is, I'm pleased that the administration included that in their request. So, full plate of what is happening. Please take any questions you may have. Okay, we'll go here. As I always respect the regulars.
On the supplemental, one policy change that was not included in the request that the White House has signaled that it supports is altering the asylum and adjudication rules for a lot of these children from the non-contiguous countries that we're talking about. How will House Democrats be willing to sign on to an alteration of those rules so that it's, I don't want to say easier to send people back, but in the end allows for the law to send more of those children back to where they came from, because that seems to be a big part of the debate here.
Well, I really do think all of this has to be done on a case-by-case basis. If somebody has a well-founded fear they are a refugee, the purpose of the legislation that you're talking about altering was to address the trafficking issue. As you know, that Wilberforce law was passed practically unanimously in the House and the Senate, signed by President George W. Bush, one of the last bills he signed as President of the United States, a bill about values to stop the trafficking. So, quite frankly, if they wanted to make it uniform, I would have rather they treated the Mexican kids the way they treated the non-contiguous country kids. But you know what? What's important is to get the supplemental. What price we have to pay to do that, we'll see in the course of the debate. But I would have hoped that they would not have made that change. But I don't think it's not a deal breaker.
Okay, that's part of the question, because as you know, Republicans have said if the president wants this money, there have to be policy changes, and this is one of the areas that they've glommed onto, not necessarily to make the non-contiguous policy the same as Mexico, but to make it easier for Border Patrol or Customs or whoever to turn them around.
Well, again, if they, what I would like to see, rather see than that, is to have in-country processing in the countries where the violence is taking place, in Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. Instead of families sending their child across the desert, the whole country of Mexico to come to the United States, why don't we have in-country processing so we can say you really don't have a well-founded fear, it's not going to work for you, so don't risk your life on something that you are not understanding. In order to do that and live up to our values, though, we have to have due process. You have to have representation. You know, if you were in a similar situation, you'd rather have a lawyer plead your case than you plead your case. I mean, maybe, no offense, but you would rather have somebody who knows the law deal with it. Some of these children don't not only speak English, they don't speak Spanish. You know, they speak indigenous languages and the rest. So if we're going to address the humanitarian crisis, we could do so in country. We can look at the Mexico border with these other countries and see what, you know, how can we say at that point, can we get the cooperation of those countries and Mexico at that point? There's no use, if you think that somebody told you that you're going to get into the U.S. and stay in the rest, make sure you take inventory of what your case is. And it's not worth the trip. I mean, let me tell you, I saw these children. I mentioned it to you last time we met. It's or did we? Have we talked about this? It's so heartbreaking. One of my colleagues said there was nothing to compare to it emotionally for him than to be there when his father died. I mean, it's heartrending, and it's about the children. And as I said, read the National Catholic Conference of Bishops. They're so eloquent and beautiful on the subject. And I met with many of the advocacy groups there and the Bishop of Brownsville. The conference report is written by the Bishop of El Paso. It's beautiful. But make no mistake, if they want to say, well, contiguous versus non-contiguous, that's the price we want to exact, what's their point? Just to lessen the due process that kids would have? Or is it to send a message to those countries to say, don't think that this is going to be easy? You know, if it's about message, okay, whatever message we can send to keep people home who shouldn't be trying to get into the country under the Wilberforce law. But the fact is, whoever is there is there. Whoever is here is a challenge to us. And we need the supplemental because these kids are in these detention centers. They're not a good place for children to be for any period of time. By law, it should be 72 hours, but in fact, unless there's absorptive capacity to take them from stage 1 to stage 2, which is more like a cot and a meal and all that, rather than just honoring the Flores law, which says they have to have one hot meal a day or something like that. You would have to see it to see how necessary it is to get the supplemental funds, to get them to the next stage, and then hopefully in a short period of time either sent back or sent into, if they qualify, into a situation here. But we don't want the message down in those countries to be, you can come, it'll take 6 years to resolve your case, and at least you have 6 years. No, this is going to be expedited. And the supplemental helps to expedite that because it has the resources in it to do it. So any question that people have about they should go back, I want this to go faster, the answer to all of the questions is the supplemental. About, I care about the children, the supplemental. I care about them going home, they should have due process. It's in the bill. I care about securing our border. It's in the bill. So it's about labor, the Department of Homeland Security, and by the way, the Border Patrol is doing an excellent job. They deserve great kudos for what they have done to deal with this. Maybe 3 times more than last year, maybe 29,000 last year, probably over 90,000, more than 3 times this year of these children. So it's Department of Homeland Security, of which the Border Patrol is a part. It's the Department of Health and Human Services, which has the responsibility under the Wilberforce law to take these children in 72 hours, more or less, and unfortunately in some cases it's more. And the law is 72 hours. And it's the Department of Justice to do the have more judges, more due process, and the rest. So the supplemental goes a very long way to resolving many of the challenges that are there, including sending an important message that America is a great country, and our greatness is about being humanitarian and stopping trafficking and all that, but also we won't be taken advantage of by using that good bill, our good nature, for people to exploit the situation.
Just to clarify.
So, when you were Speaker, there was, especially when you first became Speaker, there was a contingent in the Democratic caucus, very vocal, about 38 members, who pushed for you to move articles of impeachment against President George W. Bush. We're hearing a similar call from the hard right in the Republican Party. How did you go about your sort of decision to say that was off the table at the time, versus what we're hearing now from the hard right in the Republican Party pushing the current Speaker to move articles?
The argument against President Bush was about a president and an administration that sent us into a war based on a false representation of the threat of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That's a major accusation against the president. And I myself said that at the time, you know, in 2002 when the bill came up. The evidence, the intelligence does not support the threat that the president is, not the president, his administration is contending. Having said that, it's not about impeaching the president. It's about putting the country through that. I thought what the Republicans did to President Clinton was shameful, irresponsible, and wrong for the country. And what he did was stupid, but it had nothing to do with public policy and his office, his responsibility and his office. I do think people could have made a case about President Bush, but I did not want to go down that path because of what it would mean for the American people. We just tried to impeach, well, we did impeach, but did not remove from office one president in a very irresponsible manner, in my view, on the part of the Republicans in the House at the time. And I thought it was time for us to try to end that war, which we voted to do, and President vetoed our bill, but to deal with it on in a policy way rather than to take us down that path. So for even the Republicans now to be talking about suing the president, what are we talking about here? Let's get to work. We are legislators. They're not effective legislators, so they're changing the subject all the time. But the fact is, and it comes to executive orders, President Reagan had 381 executive orders. President George W. Bush had 291. President Obama has 181 with 2 years to go in his term. So this is again, subterfuge. It's a distraction. It's I don't know how to do what I'm supposed to do here, so let me think of something else to do. It's totally irresponsible of them to be suing the president. And the reason, to get back to your question, I did not encourage those who wanted to move to impeach the president, although they had an argument, was that it wasn't something that I wanted to put the country through. It's an opportunity cost of great magnitude in terms of what we are here to do to meet the needs of the people. It's a cost to our reputation in the world that we get a new president and we'll find a reason to impeach him. Although I would say the case against what the Republican administration did, taking us into war on what they knew was a false premise, was far more serious than anything that Bill Clinton did in his off hours. Yes, sir.
I'm just going to go back to the question Todd asks. I'm a little unclear here. This is an issue that's dividing your caucuses, where you have folks like Representative Gillar, who's partnering with John Cornyn, his senator in Texas, about switching that 2008 law so that it would extend past Canada and Mexico to these countries. You have folks like Raul Garava and Zoe Lofgren in your caucus say they don't want that changed at all. They like the way it is. Where do you fall on that? Are you more with Zoe Lofgren and Raul Garava, or are you more with Representative
Let me just totally disagree with your premise that it is dividing our caucus. One of our members has a different view. For most members, they're just finding out a lot about the distinction between contiguous and non-contiguous, as the American people may or may not even be aware. But it isn't dividing our caucus. And it isn't, what is important is that we all want to have the supplemental passed. Should any law be subjected to review as to whether this is a good idea? When I was there, when I was in Brownsville, the people there said to me, can you make the law the same for the Mexican children so that they're not summarily sent back? So my inclination would have been, as I said to you, is to take it in the other direction of case by case, who is worthy of consideration. When I say worthy, who meets the standards of being able to stay here. But that it's not dividing our caucus. Our caucus understand this. They understand this is a humanitarian crisis. Isn't about politics. Isn't about anything like that. You can have a different view about the value of a provision of the law. And as I said, it's not something that would be a deal breaker as we go forward. It's not something that the Catholic Conference of Bishops, the humanitarian, anybody who really cares about what the priorities should be right now. Should it be a priority? If that's the face saver for them, let them have their face saver. But let us have the resources to do what we have to do. So if one dissident voice does not make a divided caucus, unanimity is not ever our goal. Consensus is.
You'd be okay though with the change occurring if that meant having a larger bill?
I don't think it's it should be a priority, but I said it's not a deal breaker. What's important right now, time is important, and time means if we can pass this very soon. Quite frankly, I think that the Republicans would like to do worse. So if that's the path that they take, as long as we have the supplemental to have the due process, to have judges, to expedite the proceedings, then let's mitigate for that change with increased resources for due process and for more judges.
Where do you fall on it though personally? Do you?
Oh, I don't support it, but it's not. Again, it's not like in other words. There's an emergency. There's a burning building. We have to put out the fire. I'm not going to have a conversation about the color of the buckets that the water is in. This is very big in terms of these children. You probably know by now that when it comes to children, from my standpoint, I'm like a lioness. Just don't mess with the children, okay? You want to talk about contiguous or non-contiguous, talk about it all day. But give us the money to deal with it, and let's mitigate for what, in my view, negative aspects that change might have on those kids by expediting the process of reviewing their cases on a case-by-case basis. And there are criteria within the bill that are very clear. This didn't say everybody come running here who has a problem wherever you are. It has very specific standards that somebody would have to meet in order to qualify for that. So if that's not the story. That's not the story. And one person in our caucus has a different view. Maybe a couple do. But as I say, if I waited around for unanimity, we would never move. Consensus is what we strive for. Yes, sir.
Leader Pelosi, a question on the Employment Non-Discrimination Act.
Yeah.
A number of gay rights groups announced this week they're withdrawing support from the bill out of concern over its religious exemption. The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, in fact, now opposes the bill. Are you aware of this controversy? And
of course.
How would you vote on this bill if it came to the Senate floor?
Well, let me just say the choice that we have, because it's all about choices here. When you're an advocate, 100% is your goal. When you have to make a vote, the bill that we have is one that passed the Senate in a bipartisan way. I think that has a big value. And if we were able to pass it, send it to the president, get it on his desk, there are aspects of it I do not like. And I did not have in the 2007 bill that we passed in the House of Representatives. I'd like to see that bill. So a question of timing. Right now we could get this bill and then deal with some of the concerns that are in it, which have been inflamed by the Supreme Court decision of last week. And that's really what has. So I'll be in consultation, as I always am, with my members and also with our friends who advocate for this. When we came in, we said we were going for four things. One, an all-inclusive hate crimes bill. All-inclusive. They said to me, you could get a hate crimes bill in a minute if you took out transgender. And I said, well, it might be able to get a bill in a minute, but we're not going to get a bill in 100 years without transgender, because transgender must be in the bill, and we got that. The next step was, one of the next priorities was ENDA, and we passed it in the House at that time. Then the groups came later and said, we rather do Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was another of the priorities. We rather do Don't Ask, Don't Tell as a priority, which we effectively did, and that is a real tribute to the leadership of President Barack Obama, because he really was a great leader on that subject, as were many of our House members who voted courageously on it. For some of us, it didn't take any courage. It was a matter of great pride. So, fully inclusive hate crimes, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, repeal, such an exciting thing. Now, back to ENDA, and this is what the Senate can pass. So the choice is, should we go for this, or should we, I have a plan. I'm not going to tell you right now, I have a plan on this, because this is really very, very important to me, as it always has been. I can't even believe that it should even be necessary to have, to still need such a bill, but it is. And in states where it exists, it has not had any of the consequences that Speaker Boehner has said, job killer, whatever, this, that, and the other thing. No, it has worked very well. We want it to be a national law, and so we're going to carefully review what the options are. They could include, do we want to give up on this because we have some Republican co-sponsors on the bill, overwhelming sponsorship in the House, among the House Democrats. We have an opportunity there, or we can go to a place where we might not have Republican co-sponsors without the clause. I don't even know how to characterize it, because I don't agree with it. But nonetheless, we could go to that place and be starting at an earlier place, not knowing if that could pass in the Senate. But those are you'll see. Okay.
So you still vote for the bill at this time?
Well, I would love to see. It's such a hypothetical that they would even bring up a bill here. That why don't we just see what our options are, and I'll tell you where I was. I am on it. I supported the bill. I was celebrated, as did Tammy Baldwin and others who had been advocates for this, when it passed the Senate. And I do think it is a good result. It's not 100% result that we would like, but again, it's a legislative process. But I respect the concerns that advocates have put forth about it. So we'll see what our options are. And part of seeing that is counting the votes. What do we have on the Republican side in the House if we change the bill and go to another place? And that's really where it lies, because we have the Democratic votes. So can you tell me how many Republican votes we would have if we change back to, say, the bill we had in 2007, which was minus the conscience clause? You recall at the time it was all transgender. That's why we couldn't pass anything in the Senate. So we want transgender in. They want a conscience clause in. I don't know what it is about conscience that you would be biased against people in employment, but nonetheless, I appreciate your interest in the subject. It's very important to me and to our country that we, and again, why is it even a debate that we would remove discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and identity? I mean, I don't even know why it's a debate. But again, it is, and so that's what we have to deal with. So it's about, it always comes down to the same thing, the votes. Yes, ma'am.
One more.
Thanks, Senator Pelosi. I just want to follow on Chris's question. So just to clarify, are you saying that at this time that you personally would support that bill if it came up in the
Well, what difference does it make? It's a question of what our caucus
have to say on this issue carries a lot of weight.
Well, I've asked 200 of my members to sign on as co-sponsors. The groups were all for that. Not all. There were some who didn't, but by and large, the community supported that. So, yes, I mean, I think it would be a great advance if we could get that bill. But there's resistance now because of a change in the dynamic in terms of fear of the court. And really, we should be afraid of this court, that 5 guys should start determining what contraceptions are legal or not. I mean, let's not even go to that. But it is so stunning. And then, of course, this is more like the Wheaton this decision a few days later, which was also problematic. But, you know, that court decision was a frightening one, that 5 men should get down to the specifics of whether a woman should use a diaphragm and she should pay for it herself or her boss. It's not her boss's business. His business is whatever his business is, but it's not what contraception she uses. So the court decision is, you know, we're all taken aback by it. So we'll meet and build our consensus around what we would do. But before the court decision, yeah, I would say I would have voted for the bill, as I celebrated its passage in the United States Senate, because it's a giant step forward. Again, not what we want, but what we could get passed. And that's what legislation is. And at some point, as leaders, you have to make a decision to say, should we just get nothing around here? Because this is the order of the day. The agenda is nothing and the timetable is never. Or do we put the pressure on to say, bring the bill to the floor, it can be on the president's desk in 5 minutes, and we can have, and again, I go back to the voting right, the Civil Rights Bill. You know the story about it couldn't contain the Voting Rights Act. They had to save that for the next Congress. But they were able to get the Civil Rights Bill, and that was an important decision that was made. We can't get it all. Should we go for the Civil Rights Act and then get the other part of civil rights, the Voting Rights Act? It was only a matter of months that they got it. By the way, they're not bringing up the Voting Rights Act. I mean, that passed almost unanimously in the House, unanimously, I believe, in the Senate, over 400 votes in the House when we passed it in 2006. It became effective 2007. The court said it was obsolete by 2001-12. Did they decide on that? It's ridiculous. 13, it's ridiculous. We should have been able to correct that instantaneously in the Congress. We have a bipartisan bill to do it. Does it do everything we want to do for voting rights? No. Is it a bill that can pass? Yes, the Sensenbrenner, it's bipartisan. It's a bill that can pass, and it is a standard that the Republicans should be able to meet. It doesn't take them to a place that they could never want to go on it. They've already been there in large numbers. So understand where we live and what's going on here. And if people don't like that, they should just work really hard in the election to persuade Democrats and Republicans. Well, the Democrats are there, but persuade Republicans to be for them on this in order to get their support in the election. Unless there's a political price to pay, people don't change where they are. They don't rethink what the situation is. So, yeah, I'd love to see the cleanest bill possible. That's what I passed when I was Speaker.
So for you personally, the Senate and the bill is better than nothing at this point? Is that
I think so. I think so. I think so, yeah. Again, I'm speaking from the standpoint of a legislator. Now, I used to be on the street. You know, I was an advocate. I had the signs 30 years, single payer, single payer, single payer. Public option I never heard of, single payer. And we have a bill that, you know, everybody has to make an accommodation because, you know what, we only represent one district. And my district is probably the district that opposes the Senate bill more than any district in the country. But nonetheless, what is the opportunity cost? What happens if we don't pass anything? Is that a good outcome? That's what we have to decide. But people have come away on it. I mean, the Senate, I think the Senate Republicans who voted for it did so in good faith. I don't know if that provision, maybe with more education and people, maybe the point is if the advocacy groups want to weigh in a substantial political way, because public sentiment is everything, and they have to persuade not only their legislator, but the American people. Did you know that people in our country are discriminated against on the basis of whether they're LGBT community members or not. Most people don't probably think that that is the case, but it is the case. And we need the bill. And again, it is, again, I'm speaking as a legislator, not as an advocate. I don't want to diminish the accomplishment that the Senate made. I don't want to diminish the fact that we were able to get some Republican co-sponsors on this legislation, but I also value the collaboration and the hearing from folks. If not this, then what is the path? If not this, then what is the path? And understanding what the commitment is all around. Our votes, our Democratic votes, are solid, with or without the clause. So I'm not. I just want to get Republican votes right now, or else win the election and then have a bill. But you still have to deal with 60 votes in the Senate. And people, that's hard for people to understand, but it is the case. In any event, let's get this supplemental passed. The fact is, the jobs, the American people are concerned about their pocketbooks right now. And all these great job figures that I mentioned about the stock market going from 7,000 to 17,000 with the ingenuity of the American people and the leadership of President Obama, with the deficit in half, with unemployment from 10 to 6.1% and going in the right direction, with all the health care costs going down, uninsured people's numbers going down, and the rest. We need to do more to create jobs. The highway bill is one important way. Reauthorizing the Ex-Im Bank is another important way. TRIA, passing that is another important way. Passing immigration reform is an important way. We can sit around and talk all day about contiguous and one thing or another, but the fact is we're spinning our wheels because nothing is happening. So we're having a theoretical discussion unless they really decide to bring something to the floor. And I think that the obstruction and the do-nothingism is something that we really have to address more than what my personal view is on the subject. My personal view on the subject probably can't pass the Senate. So there we are. But thank you all very much. See you next time.